ever the consumer who pays when it comes to tariffs. They're the ones who are impacted. And as you've been reporting, large companies have seen benefit, but a lot of the smaller companies who were exporting into the US have not been able to navigate their way through, so have lost out. And so there are news stories we're hearing already of hedge funds buying that debt and making the reclaims themselves. So it's quite a complex area, but as I've said, the reality is, on the whole, it is the consumer that ends up losing out when tariffs are imposed.
And in terms of businesses, say, based in the UK or indeed in Europe and elsewhere, what is the impact of the constant fluctuation regarding the status of tariffs? Because they're on, they're off, they're back on, then they expire, then some new investigation comes through, they're back on. I mean, how are the businesses that you speak to positioning regarding the trade they do with the US?
Look, they're finding it really difficult. I mean, the UK-US trade is still an important part. It's still the largest single country with whom we trade. But businesses are very actively now looking at diversifying their marketplaces because of the inconsistency in policy. As you said, tariffs are on, they get taken through the Supreme Court, they're off, new tariffs are announced. We had another announcement just this week of additional tariffs based on transshipment accusations, which are in addition to the tariffs with regards to forced labour. It's clear President Trump is using tariffs, access to the US market, as a key geopolitical tool, and that is having implications. For UK businesses, we are actively seeing them now looking at alternatives to the US because of the uncertainty with regards to what the rules are going to be.
Marco, you're clearly wrong, because Kevin Hassett says so. You are clearly wrong, because when Kevin Hassett took down the New York Fed for saying 90% of the costs are borne by the consumer and US businesses, he said you fail to understand. In fact, your methodology is flawed. And I say you because I think you're coming at it from the same place as the New York Fed, that it doesn't doesn't take into fact how it alters import volumes, fail to account for projected real income or wage growth as well. So that's what the case for the defence is as well. What's your back and forth with Mr. Hassett on that one?
Well, you can see that trade flows have not been massively effective in the short term, but what you are seeing is a longer-term strategic shift because of the imposition of those tariffs. If you look at the inflation rate in the US, that has been affected because of the supply-side shock that tariffs have imposed. What you have seen, because of the size of the US market, are investment decisions to rehouse manufacturing into the US. But that is a short-term or medium-term impact. In the longer term, you are undermining the role of the US market as a global player.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and that's fascinating. But in the round, the data says, and I do this a lot with the Trans-Pacific trade. I have a look at, we have the latest back and forth over the last 15 years or so between various administrations, China and US. The trade flows continue to be rather robust, and that's the same case on global trade flows in 2025 and the early evidence of 2026, that actually global trade is on the up, where in some cases we're at record levels as well. So regardless of the oscillation created by this administration, trade flows are fantastic, aren't they?
They are, but the US's part of that global trade flow is declining. The percentage of the US trade is diminishing, and this uncertainty and this instability further undermines the long-term resilience of the US marketplace.
Does it undermine the use of the dollar?
That's a whole different issue. If you're looking at the dollar as...
But it matters.
It really does matter. And there are arguments, even within the US, as to whether they should or want to remain as a reserve currency or whether they do wish to remain as a reserve currency. But you can see, not just with the BRICS, but the other nations now looking at alternatives. And the euro is growing in prominence with regards to as an alternative to the US dollar.